Well, yesterday I was with some friends up at Giggling Springs. It's a hot springs up near Hemis Springs in the mountains. And we went up there for a couple of hours to just soak in the warm water and relax. And in the first hour, we were doing that. And then another group came in and did not know how to use their inside voice. So they were kind of carrying on a conversation. And most everybody there was, respectful and talking in hushed tones. But this group was just talking in their regular voices. And so we got to participate in their conversation for an hour. I was about to go over and slap them, but I was Christian and nice and didn't do that. That's one of my pet peeves. It's like when you're in the grocery store or on an airplane and somebody's talking on their phone and they don't, they think they have to yell in order to be heard. And so you get to hear their half of the conversation whether you want to or not. You're captive and you're stuck there having to listen to what they're saying. I like to fill in the conversation, actually. It makes it kind of fun. Hi, how are you today? Oh, I'm terrible. I lost my house, my job, my car, my girlfriend. My life is falling apart. Oh, that's nice. I'm glad to hear it. What do you mean? My life is falling apart. I'm crashing here. I need your help. Oh, I'm going to go to the grocery store and get some tuna fish. What are you talking about tuna fish for? My life is falling apart. Oh, that's nice. I'm really glad to hear it. Life would be much more fun if we just filled in everybody else's conversations. And that's kind of what's happening in our reading from Philippi. We are listening in on a letter, and we don't know what the recipient is going on with. All we have is the words before us. We have one side of a conversation. And that is the case with the last part of the Christian New Testament. After we get past the book of Acts, the remaining books up until Jude and Revelation are what we call epistles. They're letters that someone wrote to some particular group. Many of them were written by Paul and other authors as well. And the Philippian letter is one that kind of stands out around the rest because we absolutely know it's written by Paul. It's in his voice, his style. He mentions people that he knows, and it could only have been written by him. And we are also pretty sure that this letter and several others very similar to it were written while he was in prison at Rome. So he had been doing his ministry, escaped arrest many times, several times, had been beaten and scourged and shipwrecked and gone through all kinds of things. Eventually the Roman authorities caught up with him and arrested him. And as a Roman citizen, he declared his right to have his trial in Rome. So they shipped him off to Rome and put him in prison there. And during that time, he wrote many letters and wrote many, many things and had many correspondences and interactions with the churches. And so he was writing to this church in Philippi, which is a church that was a particular, he had a particular fondness for because he started it. If you remember, I've talked about Paul before, and he had a goal of taking the gospel first from Jerusalem and then to the Gentiles and then to the ends of the earth. Well, his first step in getting to Spain, the end of the earth, was Rome. And that's what the book of Romans is about, getting that group started. Well, from Rome, his next step was Philippi. It was his first visit to a place in Europe. And it was a Roman city. It was originally founded by Antony after the battle between two raging factions that were fighting for control when Caesar Augustus was murdered. There was a small Jewish community there. And in the book of Acts, we read about Lydia, the maker of purple. And this Lydia was at Philippi. And Paul went there and he was looking for the Jews. They didn't have a synagogue. They worshipped probably by a river or probably in a park or something like that. And Lydia was instrumental in founding this Christian church out of that small Jewish community. And so he stayed there for several months before continuing on. But he helped the church to get established, and he helped it to get going. And it actually thrived and grew for many, many years. So he is in prison, writing to this church that he loved, and He had several reasons for writing of them. We don't know exactly why he wrote it. One reason was he was thanking them for a donation that they made to him while he was in prison. But there are several other points that he is probably trying to make. But we do know that he loved this church. It was his baby. It was his success story. And as he's bringing his letter to an end, the last chapter, he has some key points, several key points that he makes. And it's important for him to get these points across because this is like his last chance. It's his swan song. It's his last chance to tell those people that he loves the stuff that's really important, the stuff he really wants them to remember. And therefore, it's important to us as well. He was writing to a church that was living and working in a very hostile environment. And we today are also a church living in a very hostile environment. Not because we're a Christian church. We are not in a hostile environment because we call ourselves so-called Christian. We are in a hostile environment because of who we serve, amen? Yeah. Because we serve people that are different. Because we serve LGBT people. Because we serve anyone. Yeah. That puts us in a place different from other churches. And so this letter is of particular importance to us. And so I want to point out these 4 guidelines for life that he makes. He starts out, and I just love the way Paul writes. He's just, you would love to get a letter from him. He's just so friendly. My dear friends, he starts out, I love you so much. I do want the very best for you. You make me feel such joy and fill me with such pride. Key number 1, don't waver. Stay on track. Steady in God. There's a little piece of advice for us right there. Don't waver. You ever have your faith waver? You ever get tired? You ever just want to say, forget it, I'm done, it's too much? You have to go back to the inside of your heart. You have to build yourself up again and say, come on, we can do it. Let's keep going. Don't waver. Stay on track. I urge Euodia and Syntyche to iron out their differences and make up. Don't you want to know what's going on there? You know there's these 2 women that are just at it. They're just, meow! I'm not going to say what ministry they were involved in. As a pastor, I could name several of them where they come from. And so there was a conflict, and he says, settle it, work it out. And then he puts poor Syzygus in the middle of it. He says, Syzygus, you go help them. I'd be like, I'm not going near that. That's a pastor's job. Do your best for them. These women worked for the message, hand in hand with Clement and me, and with the other veterans, worked as hard as any of us. Remember their names are also in the book of life. So there's 2 things he's saying to these fighting individuals. Number 1, God doesn't want God's children to hold a grudge. We need to forgive one another. We need to not hold our differences and our problems against one another. We need to forgive and move on. And to remember that their names are also in the book of life. When we're having a fight, we like to form sides, to take sides. And we draw the battle lines and we put one group in one category and the other group puts us in a category. And it's all about them and them and them. And they're not going to heaven because of what they do, and they're not going to heaven because of what they do. And Paul's saying, you know what? We're all going. Their name is in the book too. And even though you don't like them, they're going to the same place you're going. So what are you fighting about? You're going to end up there together, and you're going to have to resolve it there in front of Jesus. So you might as well make it out here. So he's reminding us that we need to let go of our grudges. Let go of those things that we hold against another person. And that's not easy. And so the first guideline is, are you holding a grudge? Is there someone or something that you're fighting against or resisting or not in communion or relationship with that you need to be in relationship with? Paul is inviting and encouraging us to remember they are in the book of life too, and to forgive and to reconcile. Next paragraph, celebrate God all day, every day. I mean, revel in God. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you're on their side, working for them and not against them. Help them see that the Master is about to arrive. He could show up at any minute. My goodness, I wish the Christian church, so-called Christian church, would read this over and over again. Make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you're on their side, working with them and not against them. Let that sink in. Puerto Rico, that you're working with them, not against them. Ending subsidies for those who are poor, that use those subsidies to buy insurance. Make it clear you're on their side, working with them and not against them. Voting against a UN resolution condemning the death penalty for LGBT people. The United States of America voted against a resolution in the UN to condemn the death penalty. Make it clear that you're on their side, working with them and not against them. Make it as clear as you can to all that you're working with them and not against them. We have a lot of work to do.
Sure do.
We have a lot of work to do. Don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns before you know it. And a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. This is one piece of advice that we often forget, and I know I sure do. And it's a simple piece. Don't worry, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. What often happens to me is a problem comes up and I go into my fix-it mode and I start making my plans and I start working that problem and I'm working and trying to get it resolved, and things start to fall apart. And that's when I remember, oh, I could have had a V8. Oh, I could pray. Oh, that's what I forgot. And then I bring it to God, and sure enough, and either a better way comes to light, or I'm able to let it go, and before you know it, that sense of God's wholeness, that everything is coming together for good, comes and settles me down.
Amen.
So prayer, we need to remember to do it at all times and in all places. And then he gets to this beautiful last paragraph. Summing it all up, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling, gracious, the best, not the worst, the beautiful, not the ugly, things to praise, not things to curse. Put into practice what you learned from me and what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into his most excellent harmonies. Paul's telling us we need to watch what we put into our minds. We need to watch what comes into our lives. Because what we put into our minds, what we allow into our life, is what comes out. It works just the same as the body. What you put in is what you get out. And we need to focus and realize that if we're putting negativity and ugliness into our minds, then that's what's going to come out of us in our actions. And so he says, first in his list, there's many things that he names, but I'm only going to talk about a couple. He says, whatever is true. This isn't easy in our day of fake news. Truth can be subjective. What's true for me may not be true for you. So how do we know what is universally true? How do we know what is the big truth, the capital T truth? What this means is we have to process what we take in through our heart, our head, and our heart. Because it's the heart where God lives. The heart is where the Spirit works. The heart is where things either resonate with our faith or not. And so when we take something in, we have to think about it first and analyze it with a sound mind. But then we also have to test it and see if it's in line with what our spirit is telling us. See if it's in line with what we know for ourselves. And that's how we can know when something is true. It's hard though. It's hard because it takes work. Not just accepting words at face value, but accepting them and looking at them and analyzing them with the mind God gave us. He gave us this for a reason, and also with the heart to see if they resonate with what God is doing in the world. The next word I want to talk about is compelling. The things we put into our minds need to compel us. In other words, they need to help us to act. We have to fill our head not just with facts and figures, but with also things that will help us take those facts and figures and that information and put it into good work. To do this, we have to know what motivates us, what flips our switch, what gets us excited, what gets us riled up. And these are the places to look for things to fill your thoughts with, your passions, things that compel you, things that you feel strongly about. Those are the things that Paul encourages us to look for. So what compels you? Where is your heart drawn to these days? And finally, gracious. What are things that are graceful? How do we know that something is gracious when we come across it? It's one of those things that's very hard to describe, but we kind of know it when we experience it. I think of gracious as like a gracious host. When you're at somebody's house and they just make your visit there effortless. Food appears out of nowhere, the table is well set, and the music is perfect, and they're very gracious. They've gone to a lot of thought and effort beforehand and prepared for you. There's a gentleness and a mercy, and they treat everyone with the same kindness. And they're just beautiful from the inside out. What are some examples of graciousness in your life? Who do you consider to be a gracious person? Or when have you received the kindness of grace? These are the things that Paul, again, wants us to learn about. And he puts this all into a nice little bundle. Put into practice what you learned from me, what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into God's most excellent harmonies. I love the way the Message puts that last part. In other translations, it reads, God works everything together for good for those who love God. And that makes it kind of seem like this is all about you. That God's working everything together for you. But the way the Message puts it, this is God's putting it all together for God's harmony. Mm-hmm. It's a much, much bigger song that's happening other than just your song. Yeah. When we put all this stuff that we learn in church into practice, we are writing that song and singing that song. It's a song authored by the choirs of heaven, and it's a song that's sung here on earth and throughout the creation and throughout the entire universe. God working all of our actions, all of our lives, all of our hearts into God's most excellent harmonies. All. Not just ours, but all. Into God's most excellent harmonies. Who wouldn't want to be a part of that song? Be a part of that harmony. You know I do. Would you pray with me? Loving God, we thank you that you have given us your word and that you have spoken to us, giving us guidelines for our lives. Help us to receive this word and this message and to put it into practice. To be the loving, kind, compassionate, justice-minded, peace-minded people, working to create a new heaven and a new earth, your heaven and your earth, in your image, not ours. Bless us this day, we pray. In the name of Jesus, amen. Amen.